Welcome back to News Geelong here on Channel 31 as we continue to bring the latest news from our great city. Midnight Basketball is now an Australian national soccer inclusion program that helps youth identify and embrace positive opportunities with dinner, compulsory life skills, workshops and tournament basketball games from 7:30 till midnight, providing a safe and motivating environment, as Aliza Houghton reports.
With our Geelong streets becoming more and more dangerous, it's becoming even more important to get the youth off the streets and into programs such as the Midnight Basketball program run down here in Corio Leisure Time Centre.
I was asked to come along to a meeting, and really it was to talk about where it came from, how it started, what the benefits were for young people to be involved in a program such as this, and then obviously get down to the nitty-gritty and a little bit of funding. So I've been just supporting the program over the last 2 years with some funding support, but I've also heard about the benefits and of what this program has achieved in the self-esteem of young people. And I suppose getting back to where it started, it was initially about getting young people off the streets and giving them something to do of a night time so they weren't being antisocial and misbehaving. So, as I've heard, this program has actually developed, and it's quite diverse. We've got different cultural groups participating now, and it's actually of all sort of ages and genders. So it's not just for young boys, which sort of people think basketball and, you know, running around it'll just be a boys' sport. Girls are coming too, so it's fabulous.
So what changes have you seen in not only the participants but the whole Midnight Basketball program over the last 2 years?
Yep. So I guess the major changes we've sort of seen through some of the kids that come through really, I guess, can be a little bit rough around the edges at times. A lot of these kids would be out on the street probably causing a lot of the problems we do see out on the streets these days. From their involvement, they tend to come in a lot more, be generally the first ones here at sort of 7 o'clock, and then we'll be dropping them home to their doorstep. So getting them involved in regular sporting programs can really make them feel more worth in the community and that sort of thing anyways.
Essentially, it's a crime reduction program, it's a youth participation program, and it's also an education program. Basketball is just the vehicle that we use, but it's a lot more than that. On a Saturday night, they'd come in and they'd get fed, which is a catered meal, which is quite good quality. They would be put into teams, and the kids would be taught a life skill lesson, an education session, which they would have, maybe teach them about drugs or alcohol, how to look after their mates, those kinds of things. And then they would participate in a game of basketball. They would do that till midnight, and then we'd bus them home.
Oh, so you actually get them to and from the Leisure Time Centre?
They make their own way here, but we certainly bus them home, so they're not released at midnight just to make their own way home. We bus them to their door, which is very unique.
At Corio Leisure Time Centre, Aliza Houghton, News Geelong.
Thank you, Aliza. Plans for a walking and cycling trail with pedestrian bridges, tunnels, flyovers and boardwalks around Corio Bay is being pushed in federal parliament by local Geelong member Mr Richard Marles, as Meryl Friend reports.
We're here on the shores of our beautiful Corio Bay, and we're going to talk to the Corio MP, Richard Marles, about his vision for a walking and cycling track with boardwalks, possibly tunnels and flyovers to connect the northern suburbs all the way around our beautiful bay.
I think an exciting idea which would really try and make sure that we have a bike path and walking path which would link Eastern Park right through to Lime Burners Park. And that would mean that you'd have a path which would be faithful to the shoreline, and I think would really be a tremendous asset for the city. I mean, it's when you think about it, the reason why Geelong is where Geelong is because of Corio Bay, and yet for a very long time we've actually had our back to the bay. You know, we've been focused away from it. We've sort of seen industry next to it, not necessarily the most attractive thing, but you know, our bay is one of the most beautiful features, or really one of the most beautiful shorelines in Australia. It's certainly one of the most beautiful features of our city, and I think if we could make this happen, it would be every bit as good as the Bondi to Bronte walk, say, in Sydney, which is a very iconic walk in that city. This would become something very unique.
And also to connect the northern suburbs as well to the city.
Well, indeed, where we are connected to the waterfront at the moment is near the city, and from Eastern Park through to about, say, Rippleside Park. But those suburbs, which in fact, as the bird flies are very close to the water, being Norlane and Corio, don't really have much of a sense of connection between themselves and the shoreline. There isn't much activity which goes on between those suburbs and the waterfront. You've got the Corio Bay Sailing Club, but beyond that, that's about it. So I think what this would do is provide an avenue where people who are in Norlane and Corio can easily access something which has to do with the bay, a walking trail, a bike trail, and means they can enjoy what is a wonderful asset for them as well.
And the all-important question about funding.
Money, yeah, sure. Well, in a way, the same issue. You see, to me, I think working out the issue of money in a way is the second question, not the first. I think the first question we've got to work out is what is it for industry that they need to give them a sense of security about having a walking trail and having a stream of pedestrian and cycling traffic go past their front door. And there are some pretty significant logistical hurdles. Behind us we've got Graincore, and there is a very significant pier.
Here on our beautiful foreshore, Meryl Friend for News Geelong.
Thank you, Meryl. High doses of vitamin D increase the number of falls and fractures in older women, say Australian researchers, who warn against using the vitamin this way. Professor Jeff Nicholson of Barwon Health in Geelong and colleagues investigated the impact of a single annual high dose of oral vitamin D on older women, as Hannah Gleeson reports.
Researchers representing Barwon Health and the University of Melbourne have recently concluded a 5-year study into the treatment of osteoporosis with vitamin D. The results of the Vital D study found that high-dose vitamin D actually increased falls by 15% and increased fractures by 26%, a very significant finding. These results showed that among older community-dwelling women, annual oral administration of high-dose vitamin D resulted in increased risk of falls and fractures. Professor of Medicine Jeff Nicholson oversaw the Vital D study and extended his thanks to those involved. More than 2,000 women aged 70 years and over from around Victoria participated in the study, in which they were given high-dose vitamin D every autumn or winter for 3 to 5 years.
Okay, this was a study of vitamin D. We've known for some time that vitamin D is very important in bone health, and there had been some other studies done in the past that suggested that giving vitamin D to people at risk of fracture, particularly elderly women, reduced their risk of falls and fractures. But the studies were inconclusive. Some would be positive, some showed that it appeared to not work. And one of the main issues was that vitamin D, given once a day, particularly with calcium, people didn't persist with it. They tended to give it up after a period. So one very large study, for example, only half the patients who were commenced on the therapy were taking it at the end of the study. So clearly something's not going to work if you don't take it. So we thought, well, we will give vitamin D as one single dose. Now, one of the characteristics of vitamin D is it's very long acting. So you couldn't take an aspirin, a year's supply of aspirin in one dose, but vitamin D is very long acting, and the evidence that existed at the time suggested it was very safe, even to give larger doses. So we recruited over 2,000 very generous older ladies from around here.
Hannah Gleeson at Barwon Health, News Geelong.
Thank you very much, Hannah. This is News Geelong, Wednesday edition, as we go to a break and return with sport and weather after this.